Today, I want to tell you something that might sound surprising, and that is at some point in your education, in your career, in your life, you will fail. And in some ways, you have to fail. And I don't say this to discourage you or to make the road ahead of you more difficult than it's already going to be, but I say this because, first, failure is a constitutive part of success. You can't succeed without failing. But also, failure can help us reorient our perspective, our life, our desires, our goals in ways that success just can't. And so I say this, that you should fail at some point, not to say that you should fail always, not that you should fail routinely, but that you should fail at least sometimes, at least a little bit. I'll go into that more in a minute. First, hi, my name is Dr. Sarah Klebe, and I'm an admissions expert at BeMo. And today, I want to tell you about my greatest failure and how it changed my life. So, right now, I sit in front of you, someone with a PhD. I got my PhD at the University of Toronto. I got my master's there as well. However, I got my master's and PhD and ultimately my undergraduate degree in a field that I didn't even really know existed as a field when I first went into undergrad. As I was graduating high school and getting ready to go to university, I wanted to go into psychology. I was driven by the desire to understand how people thought, why they thought, or why they believed the things they thought and believed. And at the time, psychology seemed to me to be the way to do this. As well, I had a father who worked as a vocational counselor for people with mental illness, and a mother who worked as a nurse. And so following a path that was sort of healthcare-ish seemed like the way to go. And I was asking these questions because during my time in elementary school, junior high, and high school, I was kind of an odd duck. I was a little weird, a little outside the norm, and I was actually bullied relentlessly because of this. I did my graduate studies, like I said, in Toronto, but I grew up in a very small, rural, sort of farm town, USA town. And it was a very homogenous community, and one that I didn't fit into very well. And I wanted to understand how we could think so differently, how we could see the world and each other so differently, what it was about our worldviews that caused the clashes that we were having, and the sort of bigger questions that can come from that. I felt like I was not very well understood, and because of the causes of misunderstanding, I felt like I didn't understand others very well either. And this wasn't just my classmates, but I was bullied by some teachers, administrators. It was really very unfortunate. And so psychology, I thought, that's what's going to tell me what I want to know about myself, about others, about the world. And despite the sort of challenges that I had socially, I still did rather well in school. And so I was able to begin my undergrad as a direct admit into my major at the time. And so I went through my first year of undergrad as a psychology major, and I found that I didn't really like psychology very much. So I went through my second year of undergrad, and I really didn't like psychology at that point. And I know a lot more about the field now than I did at the time, but I didn't realize that, different schools, different faculties have different perspectives and different methodologies and different things that they prioritize. And just the questions that I wanted to pursue, I didn't feel like I was pursuing in a way that felt fulfilling. And so I was kind of miserable. I was very miserable. The last psychology course that I took during that time, I actually failed, got an F. And so in my third year of undergrad, I just kind of floated around for a little while. I was still a declared psychology major, but I took very few, if any, psychology courses at that time. I just started taking a bunch of electives, basically. I figured that I needed to just kind of push pause, and in the meantime, I could take some electives. And I was taking things in the humanities primarily. I thought about changing my major. I didn't really know where I wanted to go. I thought about maybe going into nursing. That's what my mom did, and I thought that might be a viable avenue, but I wasn't really as interested in the sciences. Not that I didn't like them. It was fascinating in a sense, and I was decent at it. I was good at math and sciences, but it didn't strike me in the same way as, say, philosophy or writing or religion, academic study of religion, things like that. And so I spent this, about half of a year just detached and not really sure where I wanted to go. And I felt like I was under an immense amount of pressure. I'd put 2 years into this degree so far, even though I, wasn't doing particularly well. I went to undergrad primarily because of an inheritance, a small inheritance, but inheritance nonetheless, from my grandparents who had recently passed. And I felt like I needed to pursue this route, this road that I had already begun traveling, so as to not let them down, not let my family down. I really just didn't know what to do. I was very, very torn, and I felt like an immense failure. I'd failed a course, I'd gotten some B's and C's in some other courses, and I just wasn't thriving. I knew I could do it. I had always done well in school, even though during my primary and secondary education, I was experiencing a lot of this sort of social turmoil and was really going through a very, very difficult time, a sort of living hell, actually. I still loved learning, like the process of learning, and that's why I was still able to do well, but I found myself not really knowing what to do. And I had a friend who was a little bit older than I was, and I'll never forget the day that he sat me down and he said, "Listen, Sarah, this is your life. What do you want to do? What do you actually enjoy? You love learning. What courses are you finding yourself drawn towards? What do you actually want from all of this?" And I said, "Well, what's really interesting to me is philosophy and religion. I loved philosophy and religion. I took as many of those courses as I could as part of my electives. Those were the courses that I was the most excited about, that I showed up, sat in the front row every single class, that I completed assignments early for because I was so passionate and engaged in the ideas." And he said, "Well, then it sounds like that needs to be your major." And as anyone who pursues the humanities, I was overwhelmed by the question, but what am I actually going to do with that? When I said I was interested in going into religion in particular, it wasn't even sort of theology, like going into the ministry or anything like that. I was interested in sort of the other side, where you look at beliefs and the social components around beliefs. And I was at the time really interested in sort of activism and social justice, and I wanted to see how those two paths connected and where they diverged, and how different social movements had been facilitated or hindered by certain kinds of belief structures. Just all of this whole area that causes both, great movements of love and beauty, but also a lot of division and devastation, and how this sense of a belief system could cause just, so many interesting things in the world. And he said, listen, you'll figure that out later. What you know right now is that this is what you're passionate about, and this is what you should do. And I said, well, okay. All right, you're right. This is what is driving me. This is what is motivating me. And so there I was, about halfway through my third year of undergrad, basically starting a new major. I ended up having to add another year to my undergraduate studies. Like I said, I'd done a number of electives, but there was a lot of work yet to be done. I had to take a full-time load of courses every single term, including summers. I was also working full-time at the time in retail management. So I worked 7 days a week, basically. I had to take courses that were only on Tuesdays and Thursdays, because I had to work Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday at my jobs. But, at that point, it was either move forward with something that I wasn't doing well in, that I was, legitimately failing at, or just dropping out and working, retail management for the rest of my life, which would have been fine. It's a perfectly respectable occupation. It's not what I really wanted to do, but I felt like I would kind of have been okay with that. And so I sort of turned this corner, and I didn't know where it was going to go, but I was loving everything I was doing. We had a very, very small combined religion and philosophy department at my undergrad school, and I had professors who were so caring and attentive and supportive and loving, and I formed amazing relationships with some of them. They were genuinely excited to have me as a student because I was so interested, because I loved writing about these ideas and exploring these different ways of seeing the world, and willingly took on more difficult assignments because I was so excited about what I had in front of me. And it was incredibly liberating. It was the first time in my education that I felt like I really loved what I was doing. I was figuring out who I was as a person, what my priorities were. I wasn't being held back anymore by peers or superiors who were sort of adversarial to me, or who went out of their way to make my life very, very difficult and to make me feel very, very horrible about myself. And it was wonderful. I didn't know where it was going to go. So by the time I finished that extra year of university and completed my degree, I decided to apply to graduate school. I applied to one school, University of Toronto, and I decided it was either that or I would again fall back into retail management. And I got accepted to do my master's. And so I went off and I did that. And I did well because I was pursuing what I loved and was narrowing my field and my scope even further. And I applied to continue to do my PhD at the same school, and I was accepted. And now I have had so many opportunities that I would never have had if not for that moment of failure. I failed quite significantly. But now I've had the opportunity to study somewhere amazing, to work with students that I love, to push my thought in ways that I didn't even know was possible when I started this entire journey, to present at conferences all over the continent, to work at education nonprofits, to work here at BeMo as an admissions expert, which is part of my full-time job with BeMo. I also do content creation like this job that I didn't even know again existed when I started all of this, let alone that I would be, able to do that with this background. But because I was pursuing ideas and ideas about which I was passionate and ideas that are relevant, while also, working on my analytic skill, working on my writing, working on learning how to teach in higher education as part of my PhD. Um, those were all skills that I was able to develop simply by following this thing that I was passionate about after hitting one of the worst lows of my life. So I've been able to teach at this amazing world-renowned institution, to form bonds with amazing scholars, to also maintain my ties with the community and activists and people who pursue things that I'm passionate about on not just an academic level, but on a personal level. And I get to still pursue that idea of why we think the way we do, why we believe the way we do, from a different perspective, from psychology in some ways, although I understand more about the field now than I did when I was an undergrad. And admittedly, my evaluation of the field was premature. When you're an undergrad, you just don't have that sense of the field the same way that you do as you go through higher education and become an academic. And so I understand that, the issues that I faced with the field itself as an undergrad were part of long-standing divisions within the field itself. And I just got exposed to certain perspectives that are very much still under debate and under critique today, for very many of the same reasons that I found them sort of, not what I wanted. And so the point of all of this is that if I had stuck with that particular area simply out of a sense of responsibility because I had started it, if I hadn't failed so utterly, I wouldn't have had any of the opportunities that I have today. I wouldn't be the person that I am today. We're all just sort of this mass accumulation of our experiences, and I have no idea who I would be today if I hadn't followed that. But it was hard, and it caused a lot of self-doubt, a lot of turmoil. I didn't know if I could do it. All I knew is that I couldn't do what I had been doing. And so that deep and rather dark failure ended up opening a whole new world to me and helped me see myself, others around me, the world in general, in ways I didn't know was possible. And that can be the same for you as well. And so I would ask you to, number one, not allow failure to destroy you. If you fail, that's okay. Every success that you see is built on failures. You cannot succeed without failing. Every successful experiment, every successful research project, every successful person has experienced failures. What matters is what we do with those failures, what we learn about ourselves, and how we overcome those things. I know now that being faced with something as monumental as changing majors completely in the middle of my third year of undergrad, that's a hurdle that I can face and overcome because I did it. I was able to demonstrate my resilience and adaptability by overcoming that hurdle. And it's the same for any failure, as long as that failure doesn't force you to stop, but allows you to reevaluate, to adapt, to modify, and to find a different way of moving forward, then that failure isn't a hindrance, it's a benefit. It's something that just gives you new ground to stand on, but you have to stand on it. And it also, again, just allows you to demonstrate your own fortitude. And that's beautiful. So don't let failure get you down. And also, second thing that I ask is to ask yourself if you really love what you're doing. Is the thing that you're doing what makes you get out of bed enthusiastically in the morning? And if it's not, know that it's never too late to change things. If you follow what you love, you'll usually find a way to make it work. I don't want to paint everything as sunshine and rainbows, and certainly things don't always work out. And I was immensely fortunate in a number of different ways. But if you don't love what you do, either find a new way to do it that you do love, or consider a change. And if it means that you failed at that past thing, that's okay. As long as you get back up again, as long as you continue moving forward, as long as you allow it to shape you in ways you can look back on later as positive. In that sense, you should fail. We should all fail. If we don't, if we succeed at everything, then we don't get to develop that deep self-knowledge. We don't get to develop that resilience. We don't get to develop that adaptability. And those are all things that will benefit you far beyond your career. So, fail, at least a little bit. Just make sure you get back up again. So, I hope that you enjoyed this video and that you found it helpful. If so, please do like it, share it with a friend who might benefit from it. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, subscribe to our channel on YouTube so you don't miss out on any videos like this one. And take that moment to do that deep self-interrogation. Do you love what you do? And can you get up when you fail? With that said, thank you so very much for your time. Take good care, and I'll see you next time.